Hello, everyone. I've been asked first of all, my name is Kwanda Ndoda. I am an innovation manager at the DG Mari Trust. And I came in contact with Enke through the DG Mari Fellowship for Young Leaders. And through our interaction there, I was asked if I could come speak to you guys. I understand that you guys are in grade 9 and grade 10, and you're about to enter the trail trailblazer program, 6 to 9 months of leadership workshops, and I'm sure many more things and a lot of learning. And so I thought, I asked what the talk would be about, and I was told, I was given 3 bullet points: being a young person with a dream, envisioning yourself, so envisioning yourself in a specific position, I guess, thinking of your dream, and the value of that personal vision. And so, what I'll do today, which I think is a way in which I can encapsulate all of these bullet points, I will tell you the story of my life, beginning with my life at grade 10 and grade 9. And then, hopefully, what that'll do is it'll give you a reference point from where you can calibrate whatever happens in your life. So, take my story and my trials and my tribulations, and the story of how I overcame some things and how maybe some things I didn't overcome. You can take that story and use it in your life experience and calibrate it to your environment and your trials and your tribulations. And as develop yourself, use me as a reference point, as well as many other stories of different people that you'll come across in your life. So, starting at grade 10. Ooh, grade 10. So, something significant actually happened in my grade 10 year. So in grade 10, when I was in high school, in grade 9, you had to choose what subjects you had to do. We wrote these tests called CTAs, and they were they were national tests that all grade 9s would write. And it was similar to like matrics, and we wrote in a special place, and we wrote, secluded. We wrote the tests, and they were national. And so you had to choose the subjects for grade 10, and that kind of determined what you would do, because those subjects were subjects that you probably would have until matric, and so those were the subjects that you would enter university with if that was an option for you. And so you had to choose 6 in my time, and I chose math, science. We used to have higher grade and standard grade. So I chose default everything. You choose everything on higher grade, and then if you struggle with any particular subject, then you can change it to standard grade. Difference between higher grade and standard grade was just the amount of content that you had to learn and the things that you had to do for that course. So if it was higher grade, you had to do almost comprehensively everything that is in the textbook and read every word in the textbook. But if you were doing standard grade, you would be told sometimes that even the textbook would guide you and say, okay, that portion of work is for high grade students, so standard grade people don't need to learn that, or at least they won't be examined on that. So I chose science, maths, biology, computer typing, and then the languages, English and Afrikaans. And I was living in a small town in the Eastern Cape called Stutterheim. That's where I'm from, on the friendly N6 route, should you visit. But so in grade 10, I've picked all my subjects. School is going great. Maybe I should describe what kind of student I was. I was mischievous, but I never sat in the back of my classroom. I'd always sit kind of in the middle. I'd always put my hand up to answer questions. I was always engaging the teacher, and I did well in my studies. But I was also caught with those guys, up to mischief in the passage when they should be inside, doing phys ed or something. I was, the guy that would be called to the principal's office. I was the guy who expected his name to be on the detention list. I very much preoccupied with dating and girls, and very much preoccupied with drinking at a very young age, very much preoccupied with smoking at a very young age. taverns, a lot of things that I really shouldn't have gotten up to. And if I hadn't, maybe I would have been um, better off than I am now. But in any case, so that's the kind of student I was. So I'd chosen these subjects, and I want to talk about the day that we had a school disco. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have school discos, but at my high school we used to have school discos. And so it's gonna be disco lights, the prefix, sort everything out, payment at the door. Um, Myself and two friends of mine, maybe three friends of mine, decided that we were gonna go get a bottle of whiskey and get drunk for the disco. So we managed to get one, and we got drunk, and we went to the disco. Now it's one thing to be drunk, no, but to be drunk at the disco is just because you got those lights, and you can't even see when people moving. It's light, it's dark, it's light, it's dark, it's light, it's dark. The worst thing is, not only was I drunk at the disco, I got into a fight drunk at the disco. And I can tell you now that I definitely, I did not even land one punch in that fight. And I just remember the lights. The punch would be there, and then it would be in my face, and then it would be there, and then it would be in my face, and I was like, ah! But anyways, I definitely regret those actions, but I learned from them. I was very embarrassed. The principal had to take me home. I was suspended for 2 weeks. That was in grade 10. Now, fast forward from that time. In fact, okay, one more element to that story. When I woke up that morning the next day, my dad forced me to go to school. He said, "You're not gonna sit here, babalas or whatever. You're gonna go to school." And so I went to school, but in my math teacher's period, Mrs. Rogers, math higher grade, she kicked me out and said, "Look, you reek of booze. You're obviously still a little bit drunk. Go home. I don't know why you're here." And I went home. Now remember that Mrs. Rogers, my high school teacher for math, it was in her class that I got kicked out. And I'd had some classes before that where I hadn't been kicked out. Just remember that detail. And so fast forward to matric, and we're in matric, and you know what a big deal matrics are. So the University of the Free State, GOFSIS, they have come to Stutterheim High School. The medical faculty has come to us to come advertise their medical faculty, basically. So all the matriculants and maybe a few grade 11s that are interested in applying to do medicine at University of the Free State can go to the hall at this time, and this is during school time. It might have been, I think it was math period, of course. So if you are interested in doing medicine, you officers here, and you guys can go to the school hall, and they're going to advertise their faculty to you guys, and then if you guys want to go apply to them next year, you can go study there. And so the way in which we gauged, well, the way in which the teacher gauged if you really had a legitimate reason to go be part of this, was that they gauged how the other students in class reacted to you standing up to say, you want to go be a doctor, basically, right? And so a couple of people stood up, and we all expected them to, because we knew that they wanted to be doctors. They'd said that for a long time, since we were in grade 8, they'd always wanted to be doctors, and some of them are doctors today. And then I stood up also because I also wanted to be a doctor. Now, mind you, Mrs. Rogers 2 years earlier had kicked me out of a classroom because I was drunk. Rightfully so. So I stand up and I say, okay, I want to go listen to what GOFSIS had to say, the medical faculty, at least what they had to say about, their course and the technical expertise that they have, and see if I wanted to go there, because I really wanted to go to Cape Town. I really wanted to come to Cape Town. I'm in Cape Town right now. So I get up, and Mrs. Rogers just gives the biggest howl. Woo! You want to be a doctor? And she was really kind of, I wouldn't say talking me out of it, but I guess she was just shocked. I mean, she knew the caliber of student that I was, but she just was like, you, the drinker. I think those are the words that she used. And I said, yes. Yes, me, the drinker, I want to go do medicine because I could if I wanted to, and that's important because we are talking today about envisioning yourself. The importance of being a young person with a dream, and that's what I was at the time. I wanted to be a doctor. At least I knew I had the capacity to, um, and so I went. But that's just a reminder that your teachers, they play a very important role in your life. They're almost the parents outside of your home. And so what they think of you can sometimes influence what you think of yourself. But it's also important for you to have your own perception of yourself and your own reality. And so they can guide you and they can help you. But the truth is that, it all lies within you. And if you have a dream and if you know what your capacity is, you definitely have to go all out for what you want to do. And Mrs. Rogers was not a bad teacher. She was actually one of my favorite teacher, and she definitely pushed me a lot. And I did quite well in math in higher grade. And I ended up doing engineering and not medicine. But she was definitely a part of my journey to becoming the person that was eligible to do that. So that was me in grade 10. I think that story is also important for people in grade 10 to hear because, as you can hear, I got up to a lot of mischief and I got up to a lot of trouble. But I, I always maintained a steady ship when it came to my grades. And in fact, when I got to matric, I actually quit drinking and smoking and just going out altogether for the entire year. For the entire year, I didn't do anything except, of course, the valedictory, which is like a matric goodbye party. So, for those occasions, I definitely did have fun, and for matric farewell and the matric ball, definitely had fun doing all of those things. But I definitely made it a point that every single day I went home and I studied and I tried to just be the best student that I could be because I knew how much was hanging on it. And that time I wanted to be a doctor, so I knew how stringent the criteria was to become a doctor. In fact, it was so stringent, it's actually quite late to try and get your academic life together in matric if you want to be a doctor. If you want to be a doctor, you actually have to have your life together in grade 11, because if you can have good results for grade 11 and you can submit those and be submitted, then you're actually quite, then you don't have to stress so much about, your trials or the matric results in the end or whatever the case may be. And so that's one part of my story that I wanted to get through. I'm going to go through three parts of my story, and they're each going to be about 15 minutes. And hopefully, each scenario and each experience can give you light. So, fast forward to after matric, I've written exams, waiting for the results to come out. This must have been about January. I've applied to most universities already that I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to Stellenbosch or UCT. I also wanted to go to Rhodes, but they didn't have engineering or medicine. So I really kept it to Stellenbosch and UCT. So, matric, waiting for my results. I have an opportunity to go be interviewed for a bursary to study medicine at Walter Sisulu University in Umtata. Yeah. So I live in Statenheim. Umtata's not too far. So, and medicine, I still had this romanticized thing of wanting to be a doctor. And so I went and already applied for engineering in Stellenbosch because I just had the feeling that I wouldn't get into the and I must admit at the time I did make a change from medicine to wanting to do engineering, because when I realized the kind of criteria and things that they required for you to be a doctor, I then really began to doubt myself, not from an academic standpoint, but from extramural activity standpoint, because there's so many people that want to do medicine that a lot of these medical faculties will kind of try to shave off the rest of the applications by looking at not only the academic standard of people, but also what kind of extramural activities they do, so that they can have more criteria to choose from, so that they can kind of sift through the masses of people that want to become doctors. And that's a perfect strategy, right? But I wasn't. Obviously, my extramural activities were, drinking, having fun, smoking, doing all of these bad things, or rather just experimenting with these things that I really shouldn't have at the time. Um, so I'd really kind of made up my mind to do engineering. And I was waiting for the outcomes of my applications at UCT and Stellenbosch, but then this opportunity came up to go do this interview in Umtata, so I went. If you're traveling to Umtata from Stutterheim, you have to take a taxi to King Williamstown, and then from King Williamstown, you have to hitchhike to Episho. Then Episho, you have to hitchhike to Umtata. So I just gotten onto my transport hitchhiking from Episho to Umtata when I got the phone call to tell me that actually I'd received a bursary from Stellenbosch. A small bursary, not a big bursary, not a comprehensive one, but a bursary to go do engineering in Stellenbosch. And I actually turned around. Looking back at it now, I shouldn't have turned around. I should have carried on and went for the interview, because going for the interview did not negate me getting the bursary at Stellenbosch. I just would have had more options. But I didn't want to go to Walter Sisulu University because my one biggest reason was that I didn't want to go to a university where there are protests, basically. I didn't want to have to choose between protesting for something that may have been a worthy protest and having to go study or go to class. And so I thought, no, thank you. I'll turn back. I didn't want to take this option anyways. I mean, but in hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. Even though I still wouldn't have taken it, the opportunity, but I should have kept my options open. So then I go to Stellenbosch, and it's quite a culture shock. It's town is very different. I remember one of my first interactions at a shop there. So one of the first things you do when you arrive at Res is that you have to go get a padlock for your wardrobe or your cupboard to keep your things safe. So I went to the shop to go get a padlock, and I get to the shop, I get a padlock. I obviously go to the till to go pay, and this guy addressed me in Afrikaans. And now I understood a little bit of Afrikaans because I'd taken Afrikaans in high school, but I was so shocked because I had never, in Start, you are better likely to be addressed in Xhosa than to be addressed in Afrikaans. So I was like, Jesus, this is wild. What the hell is going on? And but I came to realize what kind of town it was. And I didn't really, it didn't scare me off. I didn't think that I should leave. I decided that, you know what, actually, I'm just going to do what I came here to do, and I'll do it either way. I'm not going to be chased off by the culture of the town or racism or whatever the case may be. I always feel like if you give as much strength to words as how they make you feel. So if people say things to you and you react a certain kind of way to those words, then you're giving those words power. If you don't react a certain kind of way to those words, you take away power from those words. And that really relies on your perception of yourself, right? Because no one can tell you what you are, only you can know what you are. I think, therefore I am. But anyway, so that was like my first experience of Stellenbosch, and I was like, ooh, what am I in for? And so I go back to Res, where my dad was waiting for me. We were going to have a dinner where all of the first years and their parents would just have a dinner together, and we could all kind of skarkle. They'd call it skarkling. It's coming together and just having a chat and just chilling. So my dad came through. Obviously, he had come down to Stellenbosch with me. We had supper, and it was time for him to go home. And the last thing he said to me after he realized that he had not seen a black person either, except for me, and I had not seen a black person outside of him, and he said to me, Gwanda, abelungu ngabantu, and that means white people are just people. And then he left back to the Eastern Cape, and I was stuck there with Stellenbosch. But it was fun. I have to say I enjoyed Stellenbosch. My first year went quite fantastic. I was studying my first year in my only year, I should say, actually, in chemical engineering. But what was great about that class is that I had made two friends. There were two other black guys who were very similar to me that were doing their first year as well. One of them was from Port Elizabeth, and then another one was from Gugulethu in Cape Town. But we got together and we were great friends, and it was amazing because there were fantastic guys to be around, and I think I would have made friends with them had we met in any other circumstance and not Stellenbosch. So it wasn't a matter of us being the three black guys that we had to be friends, but they were also fantastic guys, and I really just could relate to them, and they could relate to me. So we had a great time in first year. That's important because we had such a great time in first year, we overdid it in second year. So we're in Stellenbosch. You can imagine how it is. Very few black people. We have fun. Of course, I haven't shared a lot of the traits that I had in high school, in terms of the drinking and the smoking and the wanting to have fun and the partying. And I did it in first year in varsity. Obviously, had a great time. Don't regret a lot of those actions, but I passed all of my modules in first year too, and I think that's maybe important to say. So I wasn't such a low scope that I neglected my studies in first year. Although I had these friends and we were still partying it up and having a great time in university, it's a special time, I didn't neglect my studies. But in second year, we then made friends with some guys at UCT that were similar to us. And so then we would go drinking at UCT. Now that became problematic because we would leave on a Friday, and we would come back Monday morning sometimes Monday afternoon, just in time for a tutorial in the afternoon that would usually have a test, and so we had to make that. But that became problematic because we wouldn't actually be putting in any work Monday morning. Sometimes we'd be a little bit groggy Monday morning, and the travel time from Cape Town to Stellenbosch is a whole 2 hours. And so, you're just not feeling fresh. So we definitely overdid it in second year. In Stellenbosch, they have a whole term for, ukruva, too much in second year, and they call it second year syndrome. So we had second year syndrome. I had it more than my friends because I'm the only one that dropped out. So I drop out in my second year, and because my marks were too bad. I'd only failed one module in my first year, but in my second year, first semester, I'd only passed, I think, about 2 modules of the 5 that I did. And so, and everything just fell apart. I was depressed. I guess when I'd gone to Stellenbosch, I was with my high school sweetheart, I guess if you could call her that, and she was studying somewhere else. I was studying in Stellenbosch, and we'd also broken up at the same time as at the same time I was failing. We'd also broken up, and I was just in a very bad space. I went back home to Stutterheim, and I was quite depressed for a long time, probably for a month, 2 months. I missed Stellenbosch. I missed all the new friends I'd made. I was back in Stut. I felt like a failure, and I really just didn't know what to do. So then eventually I picked myself up. My dad said, look, you can't just be depressed the whole time. You have to go look for a job or something. And I had an aunt in PE, and I thought, okay, let me go to PE and go look for a job in PE. And I went and I looked for a job in PE, and I didn't get a job in PE. I got a job in Stat after a fight with my aunt because when you go look for a job, you're very enthusiastic at first. Put my CV together, printed a whole lot. It's like, concurrent. Bangena, CV. I must get a job somewhere. There's so many places one could potentially work in PE. This is not a disaster. It's going to be okay. This is mid-year 2009. Okay, so I've dropped out in my second year. But rejection. Rejection left, rejection right, rejection center, top right, rejection, bottom center, rejection. So the enthusiasm wanes, it wanes rather, and then I end up I'm staying with my aunt in PE. I end up not leaving the house as early as I can in the morning to go look for jobs or to go print out CVs to go look for jobs because there's been so much rejection. So what I would do is I would sometimes feel, okay, let me just wake up and clean before I go look for a job. And then one day she said, yay, you didn't come here to clean, man, you came here to get a job. And so we had a big fight, and then I had to leave Port Elizabeth because we had a big fight, and I went back to start. Still a little bit depressed now because I'm like, oh, I can't even get a job. What am I going to do? Should I apply to go study something else? And time is moving. It's about September now. I dropped out in about June. It's about September time, and I'm thinking, yes, what am I going to do? So after the fight with my aunt in PE, I go back to start, put my CV together, and I go to the local spa, super spa. I go to the spa, I go to the owner of the spa, and I'm like, yo, can I get a job? I've just dropped out of university. Look, I only need this job just until January. I'll make a little bit of money. I can stay out of trouble, and I will be an asset to your organization. Blah 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 blah. Anyway, I'm like, yeah, I'm really desperate. Okay, and he's a really good guy. And I should have known that the sense of community would have helped me a lot more trying to get a job in Stat than trying to go get a job somewhere where I'm not from. Like in PE where I wasn't living. So I got that job, and it was so great. I really think that was the beginning of my turnaround, really getting out of the depression and being happy again, because I loved the people that I worked with, and it was a lot of fun. It was funny, talking about customers and talking about, just different things that happen. I really enjoyed working at Spa, and it humbled the way that I thought about occupations and how to regard yourself at work, and how to treat your colleagues, and how to just have respect for different kinds of occupations. And so I was working as a cashier. That was great. So this part is particularly important because when I worked as a cashier, it is here that I once met a customer who just so happened that this guy, his name is Andre Roots, fantastic man, saved my life. He was buying groceries on account, and so I recognized his surname because my younger sister, who had gone to preschool in Stutterheim, her teacher was Mrs. Roots. Yeah, she would come home from school and talk about Mrs. Roots, oh, Mrs. Roots, oh, Mrs. Roots. So when I saw this guy's name, being the ever cajoling, enthusiastic cashier that I was like, hey, Mr. Roots, are you in? And would you happen to be married to Mrs. Roots? Bloody, bloody, blah. We start talking. I start telling him about his wife's influence on my sister in pre-primary, and how she sounds like an amazing teacher. And he starts telling me a little bit about himself, and I come to find that, actually, Mr. Roots happens to be an engineer for an organization called Stemele Bosch. And so I tell him, hey, look, Mr. Roots, man, I'm working as a cashier right now, but really I want to be an engineer, and I've already done my first year. I passed all my modules in first year, but I really started drinking too much in second year. I started having too much of a good time. I had second year syndrome, Mr. Roots. I really would like to go back to school, and I don't want to be a cashier forever, and I've learned my lesson. So key things there, I was honest, I was... and I was vulnerable. I was telling him things very personal that I didn't have to, but I was vulnerable, I was personal, and I was clear to him about my position and what I wanted. And I told him that, look, I want you to help me get a bursary somehow. Don't you guys give bursaries at Stemele Bosch? Don't you know any other organization that you work with that are consultants or contractors that give bursaries? And eventually, I did get a bursary, and it began with Andre, but led to other stakeholders and speaking to other people, but it eventually happened. But it began with me and that conversation with him when I was a cashier. So that's important, because I took a chance on myself, because first of all, when I was working at Spa, I just knew that, okay, the only way that I could get a bursary is if I did a couple of things. I assessed my environment, I assessed the general environment, academically, and then I assessed the things that I required of myself in the immediate. So a couple of things that I knew from that time. When I was doing first year, I didn't get a lot of pocket money. So I knew that, if I'm gonna get a bursary, it'd be great if I could get somewhere where I could go work maybe during the holiday. So I realized that I needed to get a bursary from a company because I was going to learn a lot, and I knew that because I was learning a lot just from working at Spa, and that wasn't even an engineering consultancy or contractors or something. But I knew that I was learning a lot at Spa, and I knew that I needed that in my career as a student. So I knew that, okay, I need to get a bursary. Of course, I also just want to get a bursary so that I wouldn't have to worry about fees. So then part of dropping out was that I had to cancel my studies. Okay, so I registered in the beginning of that year for second year, but now I had to cancel them because I was saying officially I'm dropping out. I'm gonna come to Stellenbosch and get all my stuff. I'm discontinuing my year. And the advantage of that was that if you do that, you can reapply for your second year, and your chances of getting accepted are quite easy because the first year of engineering in Stellenbosch is a general engineering course that everybody does together. So all the chemical engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers, mechanical engineers, mechatronical engineers, electronical, everybody does the same course in first year. So I was like, okay, if I don't leave Stellenbosch, I'd also had thoughts of leaving. If I don't leave Stellenbosch and I go back, my advantage is that I will have already done first year, so I would have to do first year again. I will have to do that module that I failed, but I'll have to just do that one module and then get into my second year and do it all together. And that would be a major advantage, and that would also be, a way in which I could canvas to get a bursary. Then I had to pick what engineering discipline I wanted to get into from changing from chemical engineering, because chemical engineering was also fire. So being somebody that had second year syndrome, going back again, I had to think of my own capacity, so as much as I was a person with a dream and I envisioned myself in a certain position, I also had to get to grips with the reality as to how much I struggled. I agree that I also was drinking too much and having too much of a good time and not dedicating a lot of time to my studies. But I also agree that whatever you choose to do in life, there should be an air of ease with which you can do it. You really should not struggle throughout your whole life in your occupation and struggling to, earn a living, in the sense that you're struggling to do the work. And I'm not saying that the work should be easy, but you should have a knack for it. And, so you should have some affinity to wanting to do that work, whether it's because you enjoy it more, or it's because you just find it easier than everything else, or you just are better than it. You are better at it than everybody else. You get accolades, or people really reward you with their words about how you do something, and you feel like, actually, you know what, I didn't even put in that much effort, or rather I put in less effort than I see everybody else putting in. I think that might be the definition of talent, so that definitely has to be a factor. And I knew for a fact that I didn't want to do civil engineering. I didn't want to do, that's like the only engineering discipline I knew that I didn't want to do. So I was like, okay, if I don't do chemical, maybe I could do mechanical. If I can't do mechanical, okay, maybe I'll do industrial engineering. Maybe that's the best that I could do, because it's not as difficult as the other disciplines. So maybe I could just do industrial engineering. And so when I'd actually applied for industrial engineering for when I come back in my second year. And so I tried to get a bursary, but I found that actually it would be more difficult. My impression was that it would be more difficult getting a bursary for industrial engineering than getting a bursary for civil engineering. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is that there's more companies that do civil engineering than do industrial engineering. And the second reason was that industrial engineering is a little bit more specialized and less known than civil engineering. And so if I did industrial engineering, I probably would get a bursary, but I probably wouldn't get it in time. But if I did civil engineering, I probably would get a bursary, because I might even be able to get a bursary from a contracting company. Now, I was quite confident in my strategy, because I knew that Black economic empowerment dictates that an engineering company needs to have Black engineers, at least in training, for them to be eligible to tender for the really big contracts. So you get kudos as an organization if you have black engineers, or you seem to be training black engineers to become professionally registered black engineers. And so I thought, okay, then that means that because of government legislature, I probably have a chance of becoming a bursary holder within civil engineering, because there's consulting companies and there's contracting companies, and more than that, for them to thrive as an organization, in order for them to get government contracts, they need to adhere to BEE criterion, and that means that to them I will be of value. No, even if I don't, as long as I'm black and I pass my grades, to them I am of value. So I knew that I had that, and that strategy actually worked, because I did end up getting a bursary from an engineering company, a contracting company, that built roads, and I learned a lot there from my time building roads, working on site, working with laborers, working all over the country in different places as a student. Noport, a very interesting little town, Kumga, Bloemfontein, Pieterstein, Bethlehem, uh, just outside Cape Town here, I forget the name of the place. I think it's called Wolf. I forget, but I'm in many different places, and I had a fantastic experience working with many different people and doing many different things, and really grew from my experience working with that organization. So the important thing to learn there is that really assess your environment and be realistic about what you can do. So if you happen to be an artist and you're a really great painter, my advice to you would be carry on painting, hone in on your skill, don't give up on your dream of becoming a painter, but go study accounting, because you have to sell your paintings. Maybe study, if not accounting, study something that has to do with real estate, because if you can have a good real estate portfolio, you can have good art galleries, because it does matter where an art gallery is for it to succeed. And so nothing is by itself, and we are sometimes fooled into thinking that if you do art, you don't need an air of professionalism. If you do art, you don't need to learn something like engineering or accounting, or if you're going to be a writer, you don't need to know anything about math or something. If you're going to be a lawyer, you don't need to know math. Of course you do. Everything needs to be contextualized, and everything is very project based when you get to real life. After your studies, everything is project based, and for most projects, the really important ones, you need a lawyer as well as an accountant, as well as an engineer, as well as a nurse and a doctor, and an artist and a singer, because you need communication, and you need communication that can really reach people and move people. And sometimes, I'm sorry, there's a puppy here that's moving my camera, and sometimes you need to have an art facing kind of strategy for communication. If we didn't have soul buddies, would we really have overcome HIV in the way that we did? Would we have had behavior change in the way that we did if we didn't have Gazlam as well as soul buddies, to make people behave differently with regards to their sexual practices, So you need all of those things, but it's important to assess your environment and see what's realistic for you. I knew that independence was a big deal for me. I don't like my parents telling me what to do. I don't like anyone telling me what to do, for that matter. So I knew that as soon as I can, I need to find a way to not ask for pocket money. And I was willing, so my plan was, if I don't get a bursary and I end up studying industrial engineering, then I'll quickly get a job as a waiter, and I'll work as a student and as a waiter. And then what that'll do is that it'll be less of a nice time, because I'll have less time in general. So the time that I'll have to dedicate to my studies and to working. But I'd also gained the value of working. I'd learned the value of having colleagues, the value of having a boss, the value of being punctual, being on time, and doing the same activity all the time, the value of customer service. I remember when I was working as a cashier, I once had a teaspoon thrown in my face by a customer. but I had to keep it cool, you know. So those are things that you learn on the job, but they also have learnings that, you know, reach out to other places in your life. And so assessing your environment, knowing what it is exactly that you want. I knew that I wanted independence. I knew that because of the legislative environment of the country, if I go study civil engineering, I will be important for the organization just because I'm black. Even if I actually can't really do much, I know that I'll be important just because I'm black, because they will be tendering with my CV, basically. I wouldn't advise that now, because I think that there's a lot of black engineers for organizations to choose from, and so it may not be that you are, you know, the chances are different, but maybe the mechanism could still work, but the chances are different. But assess your environment, see what the need is within the occupation space and just within occupation in general. So if there's a million DJs, don't go try to be a DJ unless you think you have something absolutely special that the world needs to hear. And it mustn't be a matter of you thinking, I must be a DJ because I can be a successful DJ and I like the DJ lifestyle. It must be, I want to be a DJ because I think I can bring something that has not been brought before, because that will make you a successful DJ. Anyways, so that was the other part. So the first part was, you know, high school, the character that I was, but, you know, still maintaining my vision for myself and making it to university. But then comes my trials and tribulations in university, dropping out, having to learn the importance of an occupation, the importance of working, having colleagues, the importance of age and how you address people. You know, when I was working with much older people a lot of the time. Some people were my age. You know, the importance of speaking to people who will be cashiers for the rest of their lives while you have other ambitions for your life. You know, there's a certain dynamic there that has to be engaged and navigated. So I learned all of those things working, and I learned the value of working before you finish your degree. The value of working before you finish your degree is very valuable. I cannot stress how valuable that is. And then the last 15 minutes, I want to talk about basically me working as an engineer. Worked as an engineer, enjoyed the work some of the time, but really not enough. Didn't feel like I was fulfilled. Didn't feel like I George English on a Saturday morning. See, my body's not used to speaking so much English on a Saturday morning. But I felt like I wasn't doing enough working as an engineer. I felt like all of the decisions would be made quite high up in the hierarchy. I wouldn't really have an influence on the decisions. That, for one, bothered me. Second part that bothered me was that I didn't feel like the best thing I could do with my time was putting together spreadsheets that would calculate wear levels and, you know, just detailed design. It became very boring. And I must admit, there were things that I struggled to do. There were designs that I really struggled to do. And but at the same time, I wasn't engaged in trying to, I wouldn't do my best at getting through the pain threshold of not succeeding in those designs, in the same way that in the work that I do now, I will painstakingly do whatever it takes to get something done because I'm so passionate about it now. But I wasn't passionate about engineering before. I enjoyed studying it, I realized, but I didn't really enjoy working. So then I moved from engineering. I had an opportunity, a miraculous opportunity, I have to say, just meeting someone and having a conversation with them. And I moved, and I now work for the DG Murray Trust, who are strategic innovators. And we basically dispense money to civil society. And so Enke, I think the cohort of fellowship that Enke is part of is actually the first time that we reached out to organizations that we hadn't funded before to be part of the fellowship. But that's basically the work that we do, and that's how I come to cross paths with Enke. So I'm hoping that in the question and answer session, people really ask me as personal questions as they can. Really don't be scared to ask me personal questions, because I think the best value that I can provide for you is for me to give you the story of myself and how I navigated my own issues, the environment that I had, and my goalposts basically, and how I managed to do what I managed to do. And the value in that is that you can then take my story and reference your life um, your trials and tribulations, your boundary conditions. And what I mean by that is the things that you have at hand, your traits, your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, your social capital, your family, your vision of yourself. Because you might be the character that I am. You might be that guy that wanted to drink, that wanted to smoke, that wanted to experiment, um, that wanted to experiment a lot and wanted to know a lot of things very early. You might be that character, and you might think for yourself that because you're that character that you can't transition and do well academically, or maybe change. Maybe you're that character now in grade 10 but you want to be a prefect by matric. It's possible. You can. You just have to navigate yourself that way. So I'm hoping in the question and answer sessions you can ask me as many questions as you want to ask, be as personal as you can, and really try to ask a question that can help you in your situation in your life, and I'll try to answer as honestly as I can, and hopefully it will have ramifications for the next decision that you make. I'm hoping a lot of you will take your studies more seriously after listening to this. Not saying that you mustn't go and date somebody that you think is sexy in class. I mean, go ahead and do that, but maybe date them, but maybe the activities that you do after that is that you study together more. But the importance of valuing yourself and knowing that good studies gets you into good institutions which have clout for other institutions that you want to get into when you want to now work and you want to have a job. It's also important to have a job before your first actual job. Have a job working as a cashier or whatever you want to do, but just do something before you get to university if you can. And when you get to university, do something during university or college or technicon or whatever you end up doing. Do something there in terms of a job so that you have more in your CV than just your qualifications, because that speaks leaps and bounds in your interviews and whomever you engage when you want to get your first job after you have your qualification. Something I couldn't fit into the talk, but hopefully you will talk about it as you do your trailblazer program, is to talk about the distinction between academic life and professional life. In university, you have to choose between the professional qualifications and the academic qualifications, and hopefully you guys will get into that. So thank you.